So I recently watched a movie called Do You Believe? It's a Christian movie, if you didn't know. Anyway, when the movie was over, I couldn't help but share my opinionated opinions about the film in that it was boring and just all around terrible. Now, the group I was with didn't understand why I thought this, because they all loved the movie. They all thought it was fantastic. And they came up with assumptions as to why I didn't like the movie, such as it didn't have a big budget, it didn't have professional actors, it didn't have any visual or special effects, it didn't have a lot of action. Those, sorts of things. Basically saying because it's not a big Hollywood movie. Well, I am here to debunk those things and tell you how why those are not the things that I find important in a movie, and also go through the problems of this movie and use it as an example to explain why I don't like Christian movies in general. So first, let's tackle that first one, a big budget, not the lack of in this movie. Now, here's the thing. This movie, I looked it up, had a budget of $2.3 or $2.2 million. Okay, now, in movie terms, that's not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of movies that'll have a budget of $1 billion, or, a lot more, just, a lot more than $2 million. But here's the problem with that. Because there are many fan-made films. There are fan fiction films, and there are just, films, indie films and things like that are made with a very low budget that I actually like. Some examples of movies that are very popular that had a very low budget, a lower budget than Do You Believe, by the way, are Napoleon Dynamite and Mad Max. Both of those movies are great. I think they're fun movies. But they both had a smaller budget. Napoleon Dynamite only had $400,000. So, yeah, that the budget is not the problem. Next, let's tackle that one, professional actors. Now, here's the thing. So, if someone is a really, really, really bad actor, yes, that can ruin it for me. But as long as they are a decent actor, then it's fine. Again, may I point out fan fiction films? May I point out indie films that don't use professional actors and they're still good? And in this film in particular, I thought that everyone did an okay job. The acting wasn't grating on me enough to warrant me saying, "Oh, this movie was terrible." I mean, I felt like everyone else did just fine. And besides that, there are two professional actors, at least that I know of, in this movie. There's Sean Astin, and I'll put his name up on screen, but he played the $6 Million Man, and now he's old, and probably not worth $6 million. But anyway, so that's not the problem either. Now, visual and special effects. Visual and special effects don't make a movie. They don't make a movie good. Batman vs. Superman has great visuals, great special effects, great visual effects, all of that. But I hate that movie. I hate that movie with a passion. I think it's absolutely terrible. And there are plenty of movies that don't really have special effects or visual effects, and I think they're good. This kind of ties in with the next point, there not being like a lot of action. Anne of Green Gables. I might lose some man points for saying this, but I like the Anne of Green Gables movies. The first two, not that third one. What the heck is that third one? Anyway, that movie, I like that movie. There's not a whole lot going on in terms of action. There's really not any like high life or death stakes. It's just kind of a slice of life story that takes place in Canada? Is it taking place? I can't remember where it takes place. But either way, it's just a very nice story. It has interesting characters. So, yeah, no, I don't need special effects or a lot of action for a movie to be good. You can have, just your normal drama. I'm perfectly fine with drama. So now that those assumptions are out of the way and debunked, let's go through the problems. Let's go through and see what I actually had a problem with in this film. Now, right off the bat, obviously, since it's a Christian film, it is going to be preachy. Now, here's the thing. Just because something preaches something that I agree with doesn't mean that I'm going to like it being preachy. Like, that gets very annoying. Like, there are things that are kind of preachy. Other shows and movies and stuff that are kind of preachy, but they're not Christian, but they annoy me because they're preachy. Doctor Who is an example of this. Up until a certain season, the show was just fine, but then they started getting really preachy, and you know, they have liberal messages in their show, which, you know, didn't really bother me because, I mean, they've had these liberal messages for forever, but they weren't ever preachy about it. Like, it would come up naturally in dialogue, you know, characters saying their opinion and things like that. But yeah, it got preachy, and so now I don't like the show. And so it goes for anything else, whether it's something I agree with or not. I don't like it being preachy. I mean, if I want to watch a sermon, then I'll watch a sermon. I can legitimately sit down, watch a sermon by, I don't know, Ravi Zacharias or, you know, some other famous preacher person, and I can enjoy it because I know what I'm getting into, and, you know, I know what to expect from it. But when I go to watch a movie, what I want to see is not a sermon. I don't want to see a sermon in disguise. I don't want to see a sermon disguised as a movie. I want to see a story. I want to see characters who are interesting go through some sort of challenging circumstances and then see how they've changed by the end of the movie. That's what I want. That's really all I want out of it. Now, the other problem that this movie has, that some other Christian films I've noticed tend to have, is being way too spread out. There are 12 main characters in this movie. 12. So if you were to divide screen time up for everyone equally, that would mean that everyone got 10 minutes of screen time because the movie is only 2 hours long. In fact, they wouldn't even get that because the 2 hours is including credits. So you have 10 minutes for each character. That is not enough time to develop them. That is not enough time for us to get invested in them, for us to care about them. Everyone in this movie is very two-dimensional and flat. The sad thing is there are plenty of good ideas in this movie. And, I mean, honestly, they could have made several movies with all of the ideas in this one movie. And they could have actually developed the ideas, like, fairly well, and, you know, been making a lot more money. So some of my favorite ideas from this film includes my absolute favorite one is there's this war veteran, all right? And he has PTSD. And everything's not going, you know, too great for him. Everything's pretty crappy. And so one night he decides to go jump off a bridge and kill himself. Now, before he does that, he looks across the bridge and he sees that there's a woman on the other side of the bridge, and she's also about to jump off. You've learned previously in the film about her that she's tried to commit suicide before. She self-harms. Her family doesn't like her for some reason. Okay, so her life is terrible, so obviously, you know, so there she is about to do the same thing. Anyway, he calls out to her and they start talking. Anyway, they end up going out for coffee and then they start dating and kind of fall in love. Now, I like this idea. I like this idea of like a dark romance movie thing. I think it'd be very interesting. Especially with it being a Christian movie, it could have something very unique to say about mental health, about suicide, about all these, you know, darker topics, maybe about, you know, war, maybe. I don't know. There's some things they could talk about in the film. But they don't really ever do anything with this because, again, there are 12 characters that you have to get to in this movie. And so, yeah, it's very hard to get invested, especially when you go from their story to another story, to another story, to another story, to another story, and then maybe back to their story. So it's very hard, at least for me, to get invested in anything that the movie has going on. Next, the second most interesting one I thought was this guy who's in with a bunch of criminals. Anyway, they're doing something. I don't know what exactly it was they were doing, but they get in this van and there's this man who's carrying a cross. It's like on wheels or something. Anyway, he goes up to them and tells them what they're doing is wrong. And they point a gun at his face and he doesn't do anything. He just stands there, firm in his belief, trying to let them know, this is wrong, blah, 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 blah. They end up not shooting him. They drive away. And this shakes up the character that I'm thinking of. He gets really shooken up by this because he's like, man, that man was willing to die for what he believed to be right. And he starts to question his life choices. And, there's this whole thing where he's running from the cops and he seeks shelter in a church. And he, meets someone who's there. And it could have been an interesting movie, I think. Could have been a very interesting movie. But again, they didn't really do much with it because you have 12 characters to get to. And there were a couple others I thought could have, been interesting if they'd done more with them, but they were even less developed than these stories. I'd say my least favorite one of these stories in the movie would be the one about Sean Astin's character. Now, his character is a pessimistic atheist doctor, and that is everything you ever learn about him in this film. You don't know why he's pessimistic. You don't know why he's an atheist. You don't know why he hates Christianity so much that he complains about people praying in a restaurant. Like it's a little overdone, a little on the nose, and it doesn't make any sense. And this character doesn't really have an arc or anything. It seems like he's just there to serve as some sort of an antagonist, but he doesn't really antagonize any of the other characters. So his point there in being in the movie, it doesn't really make sense. And honestly, it's a huge waste of Sean Astin because he's probably one of the better actors. I mean, he is one of the better actors in the movie. Probably one of the best actors in the movie. I mean, he's been in Lord of the Rings, he's been in The Goonies, he's been in Stranger Things, many other things. Those are just the ones that come off the top of my head. But he's been in some, a lot of, professional Hollywood movies, and he's, a good actor. But no, they cast him in a role that is so minuscule and so pointless. And it's just, it's a shame. So, to sum it up, that is the reason I don't like Christian movies. Because they are underdeveloped and they're preachy. Like, those are the two main things. Like, all I want from a movie is to have an interesting character go through something, go through some tough stuff, relative to the context of the story, see them go through some struggles and see how they've changed by the end, see how they've become a better person or a worse person. That's really all I'm looking for. Now, of course, I would also love for there to be even more added into it, because there are some movies, the attention to detail is just so... It's just, there's so much attention to detail. Like, for example, in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. In that movie, there is so much detail that it takes some dude making a 30-minute video analyzing everything to talk about how great the film is. And I'll link to that video if you want to know why Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is the best superhero movie. But, there's so much stuff that people could do. So much, stuff with symbolism, little details in the background. Seriously, there is so much that could be done, that can be done in a film. But yet, they don't really do that in Christian movies. They stick with the basics, like bare bone basics, underdeveloped basics, really. And so, it's quite irritating because I would love to see, a Christian who's passionate about film and wants to make a good film, instead of just making a sermon that people will be tricked into watching because, it's a movie, not a sermon. It irritates me so freaking much. Now, the problems I mentioned, like there being too many characters and being underdeveloped, that applies to a lot of Christian films. For example, God's Not Dead. There are, 7 main characters in that? Now, that's not as many as 12, but still, everyone is very underdeveloped. Josh is probably one of the most bland protagonists in that, that I've ever seen in a movie. He doesn't really go through anything. He doesn't change by the end of the film. there are some other people that change and everything, and honestly, pretty much everyone else's stories is more interesting. And I'm not going to talk about that movie at length in this video. I may start a series going through how to fix Christian movies, and, if that's something that interests you, hearing my opinion on how Christian movies could have been made better, then yeah, I'll do that. But it will, only be whenever I have time to do that sort of thing. But yeah, and then obviously preachy, that's true of most Christian movies. To sum it all up, the writing's terrible. That's it. Like, the thing that doesn't cost you any money, it just costs you time. The one thing that you can fix, go through your script and fix it. Because I can't remember who said this, but it is a very famous quote that a lot of people talk about when they talk about writing movies and stuff. You can make a bad movie with a good script, but you can't make a good movie with a bad script. So you have to get the script good to start out with. Otherwise, the movie is not going to be good. It's going to be terrible. And I wish that common Christians would start having higher standards for Christian movies, instead of just going to see them every single time one comes out and throwing their money at it just so that more of these crappy movies can be made. If you want to watch some reviews of, like, full in-depth reviews of Christian movies where they put Christian movies to the same standards as secular movies, then you should, check out Say Goodnight Kevin. He does movie reviews. Definitely check out his God's Not Dead review, and I don't know, maybe you'll see things differently. And, if you like Christian movies, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you a lot, but just don't get upset at me when I don't like a movie, when I don't like your faith-based movie. That's, if only that, if that happens, if that's the only thing that comes of this video, then I would be happy. In fact, the only thing that happens from this video is I make some people question things, question their reactions to people not liking Christian movies, or, questioning Christian movies, then I'd be happy. So, that's all I have to say for now. So, I will see you all sometime in the future, if I don't die.